at lesson 7 and Master Key Pillar 5. And it is about, did Muhammad meet Angel Gabriel or Angel
Mhm,
of the Lord or any God's representative?
mhm.
That's therefore we're gonna show a presentation and let's go for it. So we're talking about the final pillar, true pillar of Islam, pillar number 5. And the question is, we're gonna discover the story of Angel Muhammad meeting the certain spirit. And like I could say right in front, that Muhammad was right, and you will understand why I say that. So here's the origin of Quranic revelation. So we have to read the Hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari number 3, narrated Aisha. The Prophet added, "The angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard so I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and again asked me to read, and I replied, I don't know how to read. Thereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time until I could not bear it anymore. Then he released me and again asked me to read, but again I replied, I don't know how to read, or what shall I read? Therefore he caught me for the third time and pressed me and then released me and said, Read in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists, was created man from the cloth, has created man from the cloth. Read, and your Lord is the most generous. Then Allah's apostle returned with inspiration and with his heart beating severely. Then he went to Khadija bint Khalid and said, Cover me, cover me. They covered him till his fear was over. And after that, he told her everything that had happened and said, I fear that something may happen to me. Khadija replied, Never! By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you because you keep good relations with your kith and kin, help the poor and destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving calamity afflicted ones. And I want to pause here and I want to talk about a reaction of Khadija, his wife. As a good wife, she tried to encourage him. But basically she said, well, you cannot have a demon coming to you because that was his fear of demon almost kill him, and this demon or gene will come back again to haunt him in the latter day. And she said, never. I mean, like, are you kidding me? No way. Because why? Because you're a good person. And it's funny to hear that after, if of those of you who knows the way of the master, and it starts with a question: Are you a good person? And it's something like it will never led us to the point of where you say, well, because I'm a good person, I deserve to be, treated by God better in a way, right? Because nobody is good. So, but definitely, Khadija didn't know that the way of the master. That's why she made a mistake of calling Muhammad good, and therefore he should be everything good. But she didn't succeed to converting him. Then Khadija then accompanied him to her cousin Waraqa bin Nawfal bin Asad bin Abdul Uzza, who during the pre-Islamic period became a Christian and used to write the writing with Hebrew letters. He would write from the Gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and had lost his eyesight. Khadija said to Waraqa, Listen to the story of your nephew, O my cousin. Waraqa asked, O my nephew, what have you seen? Allah's apostle described whatever he has seen. Baraka said, This is the same one who keeps the secrets, Angel Gabriel, whom Allah has sent to Moses. And the question here I ask Muslims, uh, how did Waraka recognize Gabriel? There's two possible answers, right? Did Gabriel came to Waraka before talking to Muhammad? And everybody said no, because Waraka was not the prophet, was not Rasul, was not Nabi. So no communication between God and this poor guy. So therefore, there's a second question. Did Barak actually read the Torah and they say, yes, that's why he was able to recognize that angel who almost choked to death Muhammad was the same one who came to Moses. Okay, let's listen to our in-house imam or sheikh, Yasser Qadi.
And therefore, when he didn't, he went to, who did he go to? Waraqa. And Waraqa is coming from a tradition, there are plenty of prophets, right? Waraqa was a convert, we said, to something that is, it's neither Judaism nor Christianity, let's call it Judeo-Christianity, right? It's his own understanding. So Waraqa understood what is a prophet. And therefore, when the Prophet ﷺ comes to him, immediately he recognizes, this is prophecy. And what you've seen is the angel that communicates with all of the prophets, and it communicates with Musa alayhi salam. And of course, he mentioned Musa because there's more of a similarity with Musa than with Isa.
So, question usually I ask Muslims, what kind of meeting of God and, let's say, Gabriel, if you insist, Waraqa was referring to? And almost everybody said, well, that's first meeting between Moses and an angel, it's burning bush. I said, yeah, exactly. Correct. So we have burning bush experience. So
it's the only one, really.
Yeah, it's only one, definitely.
So I'll just add in something that when I ask that question.
Yeah.
I usually ask the question like, what story do you think he's referring to when Moses meets an angel and he receives revelation? Or just Moses meets an angel? Well, sometimes, like, Muslims might be thinking of the burning bush account in the Quran. And the Quranic account of the burning bush doesn't have an angel. It's just God speaks through the bush. There's no angel in the account. So usually if they say something like that, which is rare, I'll say, did Waraqa have the Quran? Because Waraqa didn't have, there's like 5 verses revealed in the cave. So, and did any of those verses talk about the burning bush? No. So Waraqa didn't have the Quranic version. All he could know is from what was potentially was what was in the previous scriptures or what he had heard, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right. So then the question, then I'll ask them, okay, so what story could he possibly be thinking of where an angel met with Moses in the Torah? And the only one is the burning bush. And of course they typically say that I don't know because they haven't read the Torah, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, now we're gonna read a lot from Exodus to refresh memory. And so we're gonna make comparison. Let me blow it out to the screen.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna read through it. And this is not just to say this is mainly to refresh your memory. Probably if you're watching this, you already know the account, but what we do is we focus on the details. So attention to the details in the narrative. Now, this is like 2 chapters, so it's not something that you're going to likely read with a Muslim person for the sake of time. So usually what I'll say, and this is the 5th point, right? So when we're on number 5, time, we've spent a good amount of time with them. So time is, ticking, and what usually I would say is, okay, I just want to share with you one more story. And that's, that leads us into this pillar. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to summarize. And I've never had anybody insist that we read it. So, and they just kind of take my word for it. So you want to make sure that you're being accurate in telling it too. 1 second. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're being accurate in retelling it too. So yeah, we're gonna read it, and I'm gonna highlight a few things. Some of it's already highlighted in bold, but you're not gonna explain every detail, but it's good that you're very familiar with it so that you're confident summarizing the story. Okay, so I can't see the beginning of it. Can you read the first few words there?
Yeah. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian.
Right. And he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Horeb is another name for Sinai. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. Now, just let me just note the angel of the Lord. We know that is it's an angelophany, so God appearing in the form of an angel. We don't emphasize the theology, right, when we're discussing this with them. So we're not going to emphasize that, it really is God, and then try to argue that the angel is God. Okay, so just note that it's in an angelic form, so we can say, faithfully, you can still say it's an angel. Okay, so verse 3, and Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And then he said, Do not come near. Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am God, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Glad I'm reading it, Alex. and now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Now, notice in all of this, there's a clear commissioning with a plan and a purpose and instructions that Moses is supposed to do, right? In contrast to Muhammad in the cave. So verse 11, but Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, But I will be with you, and this will be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, they will ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you.
God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you.
Okay, and this is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel, and say to them together, and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, and of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you, and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now please let us go a 3 days journey into the wilderness, very specific, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Sacrifices also are not in Islam. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. And so I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that he will let you go, and I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. Then Moses answered, But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, The Lord did not appear to you. Now notice in this, when Moses is saying this, he knows he's being sent by God, right? That's a very emphatic point we're going to to draw out. So here he's like, well, they're not going to believe me though. The Lord said to him, "What is in your hand?" He said, "A staff." And he said, "Throw it to the ground." So he threw it to the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, "Put out your hand and catch it by the tail." So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to you. And the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak. When he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, and shall take some water from you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground.
But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue."
Okay,
Then,
then the Lord, yep. Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "Oh my Lord, please send somebody else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand the staff with which you shall do the signs." Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. Now, note, they don't actually make it back to the land of Egypt together. They're on the way, okay, together. And in the end, in the whole larger context, including later in Exodus, it's clear that his family doesn't actually go to Egypt with him. They turn back. So, and also notice here, he went to Jethro, and he doesn't tell Jethro what his mission is. He just says, "Let me go back to Egypt." And he doesn't say he, discusses the mission with his family either. They're just going with him initially. This is important to point out just so you can see that when we're doing the comparison, we're going to emphasize that, the next person Moses really talks to about it, his mission is Aaron. Okay, so, and Moses took the staff of God in his hand, verse 21, and the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son.'" Now, for anybody who knows Islam, knows that the Quran strictly denies that God has any children of any kind. Okay, so this doesn't fit. "And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son." At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death.
then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are bridegroom of blood to me."
Okay, so he let him alone. It was then that she said, "A bridegroom of blood," because of the circumcision. By the way, we don't mention any of this stuff about the circumcision in Zipporah. Okay, we usually just omit mentioning the family altogether. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So which by the way, he actually had already told him before, because he had told Moses already in the initial scene that Aaron is like on his way out to meet you. So this is really going backwards and mentioning that God spoke to Aaron. So he went and met him at the mountain and kissed him, and Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. So here you see Moses communicating the message, his commissioning to Aaron, and he also performs the miracles, the 3 signs he was given to Aaron. Verse 29, then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. So now there's the third meeting. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs in the sight of the people. So it's interesting. It's now the message is being communicated from Aaron to the elders. Moses is present, but Aaron does the communication and he does the signs. And verse 31, and the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped.
Yes, thank you. Now we're going to compare meeting between Muhammad and the Spirit and Moses and God. So, on Muhammad, when he met the Spirit, he was sure it was a demon in the meeting number 1. The same time when Moses met God, he knew it was God who called him out and he explained his mission. By the time Moses left the meeting, he knew 100% that he was sent by God and he knew exactly his mission. Not so with Muhammad. He was sure it was not God, not angel. He was a demon. That was Muhammad's initial understanding. Now, Muhammad, at the second meeting, he met as his member of his family, Khadija, who Khadija didn't believe Muhammad. She tried to convince him otherwise. Because remember, she said, never, by Allah, I'll never disgrace you. So you're wrong, Muhammad. But when Moses met his member of his family, Aaron, his brother, Moses told Aaron everything what Lord told him, and he showed him signs. And Aaron was convinced. Now, the third meeting with Muhammad, Waraqa, and Khadija. So Khadija took Muhammad, brought him to Waraqa. And Waraqa finally, the blind guy, actually, right? He convinced Muhammad that it was an angel. So basically, he said, Muhammad, you're wrong. It was an angel. So as we see, Muhammad was convinced in meeting number 1 that was a demon. Khadija, meeting number 2, was not convinced by him. She tried to convince him otherwise. And in meeting number 3, Waraqa finally convinced Muhammad that he was wrong. So Muhammad was not able to convince anyone. Not so with Moses. On meeting number 3, Aaron, together with Moses standing next to him, Aaron was able to convince the leaders of Israel, and they believed. So startling difference. In the Torah, Moses was convinced by God in the meeting number 1, and then Moses met Aaron, and then elders of Israel, and he convinced Aaron, and then Aaron convinced the elders of Israel. And it's totally different as we see. What happened with Muhammad? Muhammad was convinced that he was wrong. Story of Moses convinced everybody that he was right. So I have to say that Waraqa made a grievous mistake, or he deliberately lied to Muhammad. Muhammad has no idea what's going on, and Waraqa used his position of man in knowledge because he read the Torah, he knew the scripture, therefore his words worth more than words of Muhammad or Khadija. And he abused his position and he lied straight to Muhammad's face. And Muhammad simply fell prey of the scheme of Waraqa. So therefore, I call that it was Waraqa who should be considered the true founder of Islam, not Muhammad, not anybody else. It was Waraqa whose words started entire movement which we're facing today. So, question, Did Muhammad meet the same angel who talked to Moses? The answer to that question is absolutely no. Again, once again, we see how the Torah, because Exodus is still in the Torah, has Exodus bring down the final pillar of Islam. As generally speaking, the Torah is capable to sink entire religion and it will go under the water. So that's end of PowerPoint presentation, and we can just talk about it.
Yeah, that's great. So I think what would help is for me to kind of explain a little bit about why are we doing this comparison? Because I think it took me a while when I was learning it to kind of to like realize the logic here. So like what would lead us to compare Muhammad in the cave with Moses in the burning bush? Okay, so we were explaining some of that, but I think it's helpful to park on it a little bit more, because I like to explain it a little bit even when I'm talking to Muslims. So when you're reading the passage from Bukhari, and even actually with that, like we suggest read study that hadith, Bukhari number 3, so you know it well, and then you can summarize it. So you don't need to read it with them. You can, because it's not that long, but it's most of them will know it quite well. But what they won't know is the detail. Typically, they don't know the detail of Waraqqa's response. So, I'll often ask them. So, I'll summarize the thing. Well, when Muhammad went to the cave and he encountered the angel, and he's, I usually say pressed 3 times just to be just be a little nice. So it's virtually
Not
strangled.
choking, pressing.
Yeah, he can't barely breathe, and I can only recall, I don't think it's in that hadith, but there's different versions of it in different hadith, and some of them say his heart is beating when he leaves the cave. Also, there's a variant with another hadith when it says the language that the Gospels he wrote that in or read. It says Arabic in some of them instead of Hebrew, which is Hebrew in the one we read. Arabic makes more sense, so maybe he's like translating it or has access to some kind of translation. I don't know what he's reading because it's not similar. So, but anyway, coming back to the logic of what draws us to compare the stories, which Muslims haven't done. All right, we're showing them for the first time, really, is because of Waraqqa's response. So, in other words, when Muhammad is brought by his wife Khadija to Waraqa, at that point, before they're having, when he's starting the conversation with Waraqa, he doesn't yet believe that he's a prophet, right? But Waraqa is the one who basically convinces him. So on what basis does Waraqa convince Muhammad? Well, obviously it's because he's saying that the angel that appeared to you is the same one that appeared to Moses before. And so now you can have confidence that you are commissioned just like Moses was, because the same angel had appeared to you. Now, a natural question is, how does he know that it's that angel? He wasn't there in the cave with Muhammad, and he wasn't there for the event when the angel met Moses. So he has to be thinking of the scriptures, right? That where he's getting the account. So that leads us back to that question we asked earlier: why, or which story would it be when an angel met with Moses? So that's what leads us to the burning bush. And so, okay, even when we're thinking that he's making that connection, how can hypothetically, without thinking of all the details in the story, or how would actually justify his position, because it's not justified, but what would be the thing that would cause him to say, oh, so it must be the same angel that appeared to Moses as appeared to you, is because he must be thinking that the story is so similar, right? So that's what drives us to compare it. is because the assumption is all that he's got is supposedly scriptural testimony from the Torah. And he can look at that and he can hear the story that Muhammad's telling him of his encounter with the angel in the cave. It must be the same angel. And even Waraqa goes on to say in that hadith that I wish I wasn't so old because I wish I could live to see the day when you basically, in my words, when you have your public ministry, because at that point your people will reject you, as they have done with anybody who's brought something similar. And what he means by that is that you will follow in the pattern of previous prophets, because they were always rejected by their own people. So he's implicitly saying you are following the pattern of all the prophets, which is the whole very basis for Muhammad to be able to make the claim that he is a prophet like the other ones, because the same pattern is lived out in his life. But when we look, the specific pattern that we're supposed to look at is Moses, and it's not the same pattern. It's the opposite pattern. For Moses, he meets the angel at the bush. He gets a clear mission, and when he leaves that scene, he knows he's been sent by God, and he has evidence. Muhammad never has evidence. Obviously, he doesn't even believe that he's a prophet yet. He thought it was a bad thing. Sometimes I avoid using the language of demon, and that's only just because he doesn't use the word in the narrative. Obviously, that's what it is, and if it actually happened, that's what it was. But he just said it's something bad, right?
Yeah, so I'll just I will use probably word demon because it's already like 45 minutes when I'm talking to a Muslim and I just destroying systematically Quran to the Torah. So, but this time it's already been done. I mean, Mecca was destroyed. Ishmael as a Arab destroyed. Quran came from and the Torah came from same surah, same God, all destroyed, right? So now for me to tell me that was a demon, why not? So I already said a lot.
Yeah. Well, fine. That's fine. And I think it's fine to do that because I think that is the only plausible, really understanding of it. If they're going to be difficult and say, well, it doesn't say a demon, I say, okay, fine. What it does say is that he's afraid. What emotion does Muhammad feel when he's leaving the cave? He's afraid, and he's very afraid because, how. You want to describe how you normally describe it?
Yeah, I describe usually it's like, can you imagine 40 years old man running into the bed of his wife and ask her to cover him with blankets, and he's so scared, right? To the point of I will say, well, probably on his place I would have probably wet my pants. Probably he did, but he didn't have pants, right? At that time. So, but this is a really unusual experience for the person of his age to act like a kid, like 5 years old kid. Right. That's only that kid will actually do that for running around, being scared. So it means it was a really, really frightening experience for him.
And presumably, I think you've pointed out to me in the past, like he's probably afraid it's going to come back too.
Oh, that's what he said clearly.
Yeah.
Something might happen to me, which is in the future, right?
Yeah, meaning it's not just in the before; it's something's going to happen, and it's obviously he's afraid of it. So even if he's saying it's something good or bad, right? Obviously bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's usually what I would just say. Okay, well, you don't think it's okay. So what is he afraid? He's afraid something good is going to happen or something bad, right? Yeah. So the point, the main point is the stories are not similar. So usually how I draw it when I'm drawing it to the close, and I make the same kind of conclusions that you do, that you're explaining. But I say, so what was it that convinced Muhammad, according to the hadith, is that Waraqa says these, after we go through this step by step, do these 3 stages of comparison, I said, would say, you know, because these stories are so similar. Are they similar? So similar that you would conclude it's the same angel? No. So, you know, I'll go with Muhammad. Muhammad was right.
Yeah.
Like, and then I'll say, you know, it's unfortunate for Muhammad that he couldn't read the scriptures himself and check for himself. And unfortunately, he's relying on somebody else telling him what the scriptures teach. And this is just emblematic of what is the overall problem that we're saying for the Quran and Muhammad, is that it's not just this one instance. It's all the stories, everything in the Quran that talks about previous scriptures is based, you know, the problem always comes back to he was illiterate, or at least unable to read the original language, the text, because it wasn't in translation. So he couldn't check it himself. So he's relying on other people telling him what it teaches. And those people are either misunderstanding it, or some of those people may not actually be reading it. They're hearing it secondhand. Or some of them are intentionally distorting the stories so that he gets a wrong impression of it. So I don't know what Waraqa was intending here, but it's clearly not enough similarity to justify the parallel.
That's true. Yep. Okay, so I think
Yeah, and maybe before we close it, I think what's good also at the end of it, so this is the fifth pillar of that we're, you know, dismantling. So this really represents the basic approach we would take in systematically dismantling the claims of the Quran and Islam. So at this point, you really want to know, basically at this point, read the person, how they're reacting to it. So they're either, they could be verbally acknowledging that, yeah, there's a problem here, and they don't know how to answer it. And usually I won't press them to give me an answer. You know, usually we say, look, I think we said in a video or two before that we don't want to pressure them too much. We just want them to hear the information. We know it's a lot for them to take, but we do want to very much urge them to follow the truth and come to grips with what's there.
Yeah.
But we're not there to like, okay, this is a debate. You're on the hot seat. You got to give me an answer now. No, I want them to investigate. I want them to look at it to make sure that they know in their own mind what is true.
Yeah, because and we are absolutely confident in.
Yeah. So I usually say, like, if I sense that there's a, I don't know how to describe it, like there's a hesitancy to.
Yeah.
I would say, you know what? You don't have to answer me now. I don't want an answer right now. I would love to sit down with you again and we can discuss it more.
Yeah, thoroughly. Exactly.
And then that gives them time to think it over. But at that point, we can also pivot, because if someone like that is more, they're seeing a problem, they can say, can I share with you also the basic message, the true message of the Torah? What does it say? And then we're going to go into the next thing where we're going to relay the real foundations, Old Testament foundations, and preach the gospel, essentially rebuilding, let's say, a new 5 pillars instead of the other 5 pillars that we've dismantled. If they are stubborn or they're like resistant still at this point, we will not move on to relay the new foundations, because they're still holding on to the other stuff. And so we will pile on other things and press them with the things that we've already shared. Because there's no point in moving on to some other subject if they're not willing to really face what is very clearly problematic. Maybe they need more. Okay, that's fine. We got so much more. We'll never have enough time to go through it all with them.
In the next lectures we'll give you more information.
Right.
And of course, in a file what we have, you can get everything.
Yeah.
So you will choose certain stories which you feel comfortable in presenting to them, and you will have it in the case of you need to use them.
Yeah, and we want to offer you more coaching and training beyond the first series of videos we're doing.
Yeah.
We do plan to make videos that go deeper, but it does help to talk it through with people and to have the written resources that we're developing. One more thing to say, so even before you go on to the next points or you go on to add more things, I usually, when I finish this fifth pillar, I will also, before I kind of get their reaction, I'm gonna quickly try to summarize the 5 points that we established. So I'll say, so what we've established is that the Quran affirms the Torah in the time of Muhammad. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls and manuscripts that predate Muhammad, and because our modern English are based on that, we can go look at it. So that's what we did. And number two, we looked at the story of Yusuf, just a little bit from it, and in that we can see these are not both from the same author, right? So it's not God who authored both of them, but the Quran says it is. So the Quran is wrong. So in that case, the Quran is not from God.
Yes.
We continue to look at the stories, and we looked at Abraham and Ishmael and whether they traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba. And according to the Torah, they didn't travel to Mecca and they didn't build the Kaaba, which means the Kaaba is a pagan shrine. It's not from Abraham, right? And 4, we looked at the fact that the question of ancestry. So was Ishmael the progenitor or ancestor of the Arabs, especially specifically in Mecca? And did Muhammad descend from him? We realized no. According to the Torah, Ishmael didn't live anywhere near Mecca, and he married an Egyptian wife, and so that means you can't trace that line there. He didn't grow up there marrying into an Arab tribe like the Hadith says. So in which case, Islam is not an Abrahamic religion. It's not Abrahamic in terms of the Kaaba, and it's not Abrahamic in terms of prophethood, and which means that Muhammad is not a prophet. And lastly, we saw that when the basis for Muhammad coming to believe he's a prophet really started with Waraqa pointing to the scriptures and the similarity of the account of his commissioning with Moses, and we see they're not similar, so it doesn't justify that idea, and of course it doesn't justify it with everything else we just saw.
Mm-hmm. And basically what I say, it's if we cannot convince any Muslim with that kind of using the Torah and these arguments, even more arguments that there's a way to go.
Right.
There is no point to go to New Testament.
No, there's nothing stronger than this, because in all the stories that we're looking at, it's important to see that we're sharing with them details in the stories that are mostly just kind of narrative details that don't have direct theological significance.
Yeah.
So it's not like, so usually when we kind of press some points, so we think of like the story with Jacob's reaction, it's not the difference in that story, whether he believes that Joseph is alive or dead and believes the report of the brothers, or whether the brothers were even making the claim or not, whether they're just presenting the shirt, or they're saying, this is Joseph's shirt, we know you won't believe us, versus here it is, we don't know, like, is this Joseph's shirt?
Yeah.
Those differences are opposite, so they're not reconcilable. But so if the Jews did corrupt it, as Islam requires that claim, they didn't corrupt it for any theological motivation, because there's no theology that changes by telling it differently in that specific way. And there isn't a change in moral teaching, ethical teaching, by changing those details. And there isn't any change to prophecies of Muhammad.
Yes.
And there isn't any change to political things. So we're going to come into this more deeply in later videos, but what I want you to see is the details really matter. not so much the doctrines, because the doctrines, in their mind, they can kind of say, oh, well, maybe the Christian scriptures were corrupted because of theology.
Exactly.
Like they wanted to elevate a man into God, and that was inappropriate, blasphemous, idolatrous. Which you can kind of hypothetically, without looking at evidence, you can kind of think, well, maybe that's a reasonable idea. But in this case, it's not even reasonable, apart even looking at evidence, as a hypothetical idea. So because it has nothing to do with theology, ethics, politics, or prophecy. So I would just say, if they're being reasonable, they're stuck, because there is no good explanation for it. And we can multiply it. Those are just a few details. We're probably going to have a few thousand if we wanted to,
Yeah, for sure.
if we had the time to lay it all out. Yeah. So that's really it. And that's to help you to see it as a very powerful tool, this strategy, to help them to really gain a perspective that this is not something that, where taking the Quran's own claim that it confirms the Torah, it doesn't.
And also, I want to say that this methodology is seamlessly not only destroying the Islam as a false religion, but also seamlessly bring gospel into it, because we're using the same book, which is a Torah primarily, to dismantle Islam, and then we're going to use the same book to relay the Old Testament foundation and then preach gospel from that platform as well. So there is no need for us to use any argument which could bring Muslim out of Islam to become an atheist or agnostic, and then we'll try to convince him that yes, of course, the Torah, the Quran is not reliable, but here's the Bible, and trust us, it is a reliable book. It will be an uphill battle. I heard of a number of people who were living Islam because they've been convinced that Islam is no good, right? By different reasons, the moral argument usually, and the false scientific claims. But since they've not been presented through the Bible, the Quran was not destroyed by biblical argument, but by, let's say, secular argument. They automatically become an atheist.
Yeah.
So now we need to actually try to convince him back, saying, no, don't be an atheist, and you should believe in God, but God is not a lie. And now we have to explain them the Bible, which will be another uphill battle. So I met people like that, and it's very difficult for me. It was very difficult for me to preach Christ to them, because they already been so disgusted by any religion, because they believe that Allah is true God and Allah represented God. So if Allah is no God, there is no other God. So they became an atheist, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can call up this lesson.
Yeah.
And next time we're going to talk about how to relay Old Testament foundation, rebuild 5 new pillars, the 2 pillars, and how to preach gospel from that platform.
Yep.
Okay. All right. See you next time. Bye-bye.